Welcome back to another episode of Live at QP with Stand on Guard. I'm your host, David Crayden. Thanks for joining me today. Couldn't show you our 10-minute intro because there was some problems with the sound copyright. Anyway, we're looking into it. Hopefully we'll have that back again soon. But I've got a couple of things to show you today. The ongoing debate. I see a comment here. Is Fergie stepping down? Hope so. I doubt it. Why would he step down when he's got the support of the Liberals and NDP? And the NDP, by the way, if you haven't heard, have said they're supporting the budget. Oh, big surprise. Yeah. So all of you folks who predicted the NDP would support the budget because of all those NDP members who want to stay in government, so-called, until the next election is called so they can collect their pension. Looks like you were right. So why should we be surprised that politicians, especially left-wing socialist politicians, would ever put principle ahead of their personal greed? Let's have a look at this clip here. It shows you how the blockheads can't decide whether they're supporting or not supporting the speaker. Their prickly leader initially said, "Good show," to Fergus for kicking Poilievre out of the House of Commons, but then some of the other members had second thoughts.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to congratulate you on your common sense today.
Common sense, eh? That's the blockade. Well, they shouldn't even be sitting in the House of Commons. We all know that. Yeah, so turns out Blanchett wasn't speaking for the whole caucus. And there was some disagreement over whether or not the bloc should be supporting this wacko speaker and wacko PM or not. But there's more controversy. Yes. Rachel Thomas. The speaker kicked her out too. And this is the Conservative MP from Lethbridge. The speaker kicked her out even though she retracted her words. I'll have more to say about this, but let's watch
Lethbridge, who has given notice for a question of privilege.
Mr. Speaker, I rise on a point of privilege today regarding a significant discrepancy between what was published in the Blues and what was published in Hansard of yesterday. The question of privilege that I raise also has to do with how I was treated by the Speaker of this House and how I was further portrayed. The discrepancy between the Blues and what was published in the Hansard is the omission of two words, two very important documented words.
Okay, y'all listening to this? The Liberals now control the Hansard. They're now censoring the Hansard because Rachel Thomas is pointing out here that they deliberately excised two words that she had spoken.
An exchange between the Speaker and me during question period yesterday. The Blues recorded the following statement by the Speaker. I quote directly. If the honourable member for Lethbridge has problems with the chair, she should challenge the chair in a respectful way. But as the honourable member knows, challenging the chair is against the rules of this House. I ask the honourable member to please withdraw her remark to say this, quote, Mr. Speaker, I stated that the chair is acting in a disgraceful manner. I withdraw. In the Hansard recording, two words are missing. The words, I withdraw.
Wow.
That said, it should be noted that it is reported in Hansard that at least one member did point out to the Speaker that these words, in fact, were spoken.
Order. I'm going to ask the honourable member from Lethbridge if she has problems with the chair that she should challenge the chair in a way. But as she knows, as the honourable member from Lethbridge knows, that by challenging the chair is against the rules of this House. I'll ask the honourable member to please to ask her to withdraw her remarks.
The chair is acting in a disgraceful manner.
I'm going to ask you, will you...
The chair is acting in a disgraceful manner.
I'm going to ask you, will you...
Yeah, he's turning the mic off. This is what he does.
Other member, it says the following, quote, she withdrew it. In the audio recording, many other members were heard drawing attention to this fact, asking for the Speaker to do the same.
I thank the honourable member. I thank the honourable member from Lethbridge for raising this matter of question of privilege. I do encourage her, please, to share all the information that she would like to have the speakership to evaluate, and certainly we will take this with extreme importance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's difficult to keep track, but I was very distressed by the additional information that was just provided by the honourable member from Lethbridge. I'm sure all of us in this place know how critically important it is that we have no question in our minds as to the accuracy of hansard.
Now, I don't have a lot of time for Elizabeth May, but at least she's being principled here. She's trying to be above politics, and she's acknowledging the Liberals are just a bunch of nasty censors. And this is my old friend James Bazan, the defense critic for the Conservative Party, and an MP from Selkirk, Interlake, East Manitoba.
I'm disturbed by the fact that someone went to the effort of withdrawing "I withdraw" as a quotation from the Hansard record itself. As a long-serving member, someone who wants to make sure that the historical record is correct, that is reflected in the Hansard. So I encourage your office to dig down and find out who made that change to the Blues. That type of edit does change intent. Now, I can understand, Mr. Speaker, in the raucous that occurred yesterday in the House, that you may not have personally heard the comment, "I withdraw," but that doesn't excuse the fact that somebody had gone into the Blues and edited out those comments to appear in the official Hansard. And that undermines our freedom of speech here, as well as our privilege as parliamentarians. And that is, in my opinion, has done with intent, and there's definitely a contempt of.
So there you have it, folks. The Liberals clearly censored the Hansard to remove Rachel Thomas's words. Is this a big deal? Yeah, it's another symptom of authoritarianism in this country. Just like throwing out the leader of the opposition because he used a word like wacko and extremist is also another symptom of totalitarianism in this country. I have said for years, and I hope I'm not boring you right now by repeating this, but democracy is not just about having an election every 4 years or even 5 years like we used to have. It's about having a viable, real, official opposition that can't be shut out of the House of Commons, whose leader can't be silenced and kicked out of question period because the Speaker is so partisan he's in the pocket of the Prime Minister. That's the difference between democracy and authoritarian regimes. We're also losing our free speech in this country. I talk about it every day with the Online Harms Act, with the other censorship bills the Trudeau government has passed that make it difficult to speak freely on the internet. This next bill will make it impossible. We all know that. We've discussed it. It's going to make thought crime real. Such a thing should not exist anywhere. It's going to put people in prison for life for so-called hate speech. It's going to make people subject to $100,000 fines. That's what this Trudeau government is all about. That's what it's doing. And that's what this little bit from Fergus was. I don't know if the speaker himself excised these words, but the speaker himself shut off her microphone so he didn't have to hear it or pretend he didn't hear it. This is a speaker who's not only just a partisan hack, he's constantly shutting off the mic so you can't hear the heckling. You can't hear the remarks being made, only the remarks he wants you to hear. This is a horrible excuse for a speaker. He is in the pocket of Justin Trudeau and the Liberals, and Fergus does need to go. But he won't go. He will not resign. He will not consider the damage he's doing to his office and to this country as long as he stays in that office. As long as he stays Speaker, he's toxic. But he's got the support of the Liberals, and the NDP are in the pocket of Justin Trudeau. I hope they go down to massive defeat in the next election, because the NDP are the party of duplicity. They pretend they're an opposition party, but they're in the pocket of the Liberal government, and they're openly propping them up in a de facto coalition. And for that, the NDP needs to be completely decimated, eviscerated in the next election. They deserve that. They do not deserve any of their members to come back, because they're all cowards. They're all craven MPs who can't find any courage to stand up to Justin Trudeau. And most of them are doing it for their own personal gain, because they want their pension. And this is absolute, and I'm not talking about just a basic, they want their enhanced pension. They want their money. So this is unacceptable, but this is what you expect from a socialist opposition that's pretending to be an opposition. It's a socialist coalition, and that's all this is. We're going to go to question period now. We'll see how subdued Mr. Poilievre is today. He was perhaps a bit too subdued yesterday, but I think he got his point across nicely. By the way, I'm posting an interview I did this morning later today. Well, later today, I'm posting an interview this morning I did with Kyle Kemper. He's the half brother of Justin Trudeau, and he doesn't think or talk like Justin Trudeau. Great interview. I hope you enjoy it. Let's go to question period. And thank you for joining me today. And please like this show. Hit the button. Give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't already. We're doing well in the subscription department, thanks to you folks. And if you've been unsubscribed, don't take that for an answer. Subscribe again. And let's fight this YouTube censorship as hard as we're fighting Justin Trudeau's censorship. And let's enjoy question period together.
That's taught skills and offered community to more than 10,000 families seriously affected by the mental health problems of a loved one. Every year, the foundation organizes the Sash Bear Walk, which brings together hundreds of supporters to create an orange sea of support, reduce stigma, and raise awareness of this illness and our national mental health crisis. Visit sashbear.org to learn more about BPD and how to reduce stigma.
The honourable member from Skeena-Bulkley Valley.
Mr. Speaker, teams from around the world are gathering in Calgary next week for the World Para-Hockey Championships, and I'm so pleased to share that the starting goalie for Team Canada is none other than Adam Kingsmill from my home community of Smithers, BC. Oh. Despite losing his leg in a tragic lawnmower accident when he was just a toddler, Adam became an accomplished athlete, playing softball, racing motocross, and excelling at stand-up hockey, all with the incredible support of his parents, Bobby and Grange. In 2016, he caught the eye of Team Canada's coaches, who convinced him to try para-hockey or sledge hockey. And 5 years later, he brought home a silver medal from the World Championships in the Czech Republic. He followed that up just a year later with another silver, this time at the Paralympic Games in Beijing, China. Adam's indomitable spirit, his determination and achievement continue to inspire people across northern BC and across Canada. I hope my colleagues will join me in wishing him and his teammates the very best of luck at this year's World Championships. Go Canada, go Adam.
We should be starting question period now.
The honourable member for Saint-Hyacinthe-Bagotte.
He keeps
Mr.
these
Speaker,
statements keep
one of
getting
my
longer and
constituents
longer
has made
every
it
day.
into the Guinness Book. Jenny Barret, who suffers
20
from the
minutes of
rare
statements
genetic
now.
disorder osteogenesis imperfecta, completed her 10th wheelchair marathon in London 2 weeks ago. In doing so, she clocked the fastest marathon ever run by a woman in a wheelchair, 4 hours, 19 minutes, and 21 seconds. In doing so, she beat the 1983 record set by no less than an Olympian. Jenny may be battling brittle bone disease, but she also has nerves of steel. The woman who suffered 157 fractures in her life has never stopped training for some 20 years in her second home, the St. Hyacinthe Boxing Club, originally founded by her father, Bernard. She's certainly not going to stop now. She's a model of unflagging determination who should inspire us all. Jenny, my dear friend, you're a source of pride to our region and to all of Quebec.
The honourable member from Hastings, Lennox and Addington.
Canadians are way past their breaking point. It's so bad that the CEO of Food Banks Canada now says that food banks are becoming unsustainable. Canadian food bank usage is at a historic high, 2 million people per month. Food banks cannot meet this demand. For people that have not been forced to the food banks and still utilize their local grocery store, let's consider some facts from a new report by Canada's food professor. 60% of Canadians are so desperate that they are eating expired or spoiled food. 20% of households with the lowest incomes use over 20% of their disposable income just to buy food. Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of short-sighted policies of this Liberal NDP government, families are sliding deeper and deeper into debt. This is not the Canada that I grew up in, and this is not the Canada that we want to raise our children in. Common sense Conservatives will rebuild our economy and bring home lower prices for all Canadians.
The honourable member from Mississauga East, Cooksville.
This Fergus is so incompetent. He can't even tell time.
We had a historic vote on my motion M75 in the House of Commons. Unanimously, all members of Parliament spanning various political affiliations and regions of our country resoundingly gave an unwavering support for declaring May as Polish Heritage Month and designating May 3rd as Polish Constitution Day in Canada. Today, on Polish National Flag Day, parliamentarians from Canada and Poland, the Polish Embassy, Ambassador Jelski, Consuls General, the Canadian Polish Congress, and the community at large came together to commemorate these milestones on Parliament Hill for the first ever Polish flag raising.
That article is exactly what I'm writing at the moment.
Celebrate Polish Heritage Month and
Diagolon
May 3rd
is a
Constitution
farce.
Day from coast to
It
coast
is
to
not
coast.
some
with
sort
the
of
Polish and Canadian
militia
flags
on the
flying
prairie.
proudly on Parliament
It's a bunch
Hill,
of guys
I say
chatting
dziękuję
on the
bardzo.
internet.
Thank you
Sometimes
so
they
much
say
to the
stupid
entire
things,
Polish
sometimes they
Canadian
don't.
community.
But they're sure as hell not some kind of military force that's going to overthrow the government. It's absolute BS.
Oral questions.
Finally, get on with it, Speaker. Oh, Polyev has had it today. Okay.
When will the Prime Minister make it illegal to smoke crack in a hospital room? Just the date, please.
That's a good question.
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker,
Oh, we get to hear Freeland today. Oh my God, it's going to be a hard one.
Made a request for a temporary pilot project. BC now has concerns about that project, which we share. We are now working together to address those concerns. Opioid addiction is a tragedy that has affected far too many Canadian families. We have to work together to solve it, not score cheap partisan points.
Did she sound
the pain
just a
of
little bit
Canadians.
sincere
There
at
are
all?
no
No.
pilot projects anywhere else in Canada.
The Honourable Member from Regina Capel.
Because of this government's decision, it is no longer illegal to smoke crack, meth, or shoot up heroin in public spaces in British Columbia like parks, hospitals, and public transit. The British Columbia government has now begged the Prime Minister to reverse this decision. So, simple question, when will the Prime Minister once again make it illegal to smoke crack in a hospital room? Just the date.
Speaking of crack,
The Honourable Deputy Prime
Just
Minister,
say no.
Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker.
yeah, I like the
Unlike the
GSP.
Conservatives, we believe in working together with Canadians to solve our country's most pressing problems. That's why earlier this week, I was in touch with Premier Eby, and I assured him that we share his concerns and we are working urgently together to
Oh,
address them.
you're working so
And let's
urgently.
remember, opioid addiction is a tragedy which is afflicting so many Canadian families. Let's work together to help them, not score cheap partisan points.
Oh, get out of here.
The Honourable Member from Regina Capel.
Dangerous addictions are hurting Canadians. After this government's decision to change the law, overdose deaths shot up and drug-related crime went through the roof. Now, the British Columbia government is asking for the government to reverse their decision. It's a simple question. It's a simple decision to make. So one final time, Mr. Speaker, on what date will this government make it illegal to smoke crack in a hospital room? Just the date.
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, unlike the Conservative House Leader, I've actually been in touch with the Premier of BC about this truly pressing issue. And unlike the Conservatives, we are working collaboratively with the province of BC. We share their concerns, and we are working together to support public health and public safety. What we're not doing is fundraising off of the pain, death, and suffering of Canadians.
The Honourable Member for Mégantic-Clérable.
Too much.
Every day that this radical Prime Minister dithers on the deadly experiment of legalizing hard drugs is another day that people die. Currently 6 a day in British Columbia. After 9 years of this Prime Minister, Quebec is not immune to this crisis, which affects every part of Canada. I quote from the Journal de Montréal, "Crack use is exploding in Montreal and we'll be seeing more and more of it in public places." Will the Prime Minister put an end to his extremist experiment in legalizing hard drugs and say no to any expansion in Quebec? The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Finance. Mr. Speaker, British Columbia has asked for a pilot project. British Columbia now has certain serious concerns that we share. And that is the reason for which we will be working urgently in close collaboration with the province to meet these concerns. Mr. Speaker, these are tragedies
You're
for
welcome,
families throughout Canada. We need to put partisanship aside when it comes to this kind of matter. The Honourable Member from Mégantic-Clérable. It's not partisanship to talk about syringes on the floor, degrading scenes and outbursts a stone's throw from a school in Montreal. Now that we know that the radical experiment in legalizing hard drugs in British Columbia by the Prime Minister, supported by the Bloc Québécois, by the way, was catastrophic and deadly. The Bloquiste MP for Joliette said in this House, the hope is that this pilot project will pave the way. The MP for Rimouski said, we in the Bloc Québécois are deeply convinced that this is a step in the right direction. Quebec doesn't want this. Can the Prime Minister assure this House that he will not follow the radical advice of the Bloc Québécois? The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Finance. Mr. Speaker, the opioid epidemic and addiction is a tragedy that we have to fight together by giving a priority to the health and safety of Canadians. But, Mr. Speaker, Conservatives are just saying that our policy is extremist and radical. Do you know, Mr. Speaker, what is extremist and radical? White supremacy policy. Misogyny is
Are you talking
radical.
about Justin
And so it's time for
Trudeau?
the Conservatives to denounce those policies that are truly extremist and radical.
No,
The
she's
Honourable
getting in
Member
on this
Clay.
act too.
La Presse reported today that CBC's management is planning a rapprochement between the English network and Radio-Canada. Radio-Canada is not in crisis. CBC is. A rapprochement necessarily comes with concessions, and these concessions will be made at the expense of Quebec culture and creators. It necessarily means taking away a bit of our cultural identity to assimilate it with that of English Canada. This is a dangerous, slippery slope. Can the Prime Minister reassure French-speaking Quebecers and Canadians that the government has absolutely no intention of merging CBC and Radio-Canada? The Honourable Deputy Minister, Prime Minister, and the Minister for Finance. A big thank you for the question, first of all, because we fully share the concerns of all Canadians, especially the concerns of Quebecers when it comes to the French language, when it comes to Quebec culture. And I can assure all Canadians that French broadcasting will not be affected. That's a priority for us. The Honourable Member for La Prairie. Mr. Speaker, we have a proposal. Instead of bringing CBC and Radio-Canada closer together, we should make them independent of each other. CBC has its challenges.
Oh, yeah, that's all we
Radio-Canada
need.
has its own.
Two crown
The two
corporations.
have neither the same cultural identity, nor the same
Yeah,
audience, nor
two
the same
state media.
corporate culture.
These people are so
These are
blathered
two
in the
completely
head.
separate entities. But what CBC management is proposing, a management appointed by the Liberals, by the way, is to weaken Radio-Canada in order to strengthen CBC. In the long term, this means assimilating the French language public broadcaster. Why not turn
Who
it
the hell
into two
really
completely
cares?
separate crown corporations?
Yeah, that's exactly
The
what I
Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and
what I
Minister for
said.
Finance.
Yeah.
Mr. Speaker, we share people's concerns with regards to the French language in Canada, and with regards to French culture, and with regards to Quebec culture in Canada. On this side of the House, we will always, always, always work as hard as we can to support the French language, Canadian and Quebec culture in French. We will always support Radio-Canada.
L'honorable député de Rosemont, la petite patrie.
Thank you,
The
Judy.
Honourable Member for Rosemont, la Petite Patrie. Mr. Speaker, another report, another failure. With this Minister for the Environment, the wheel Canada is going to miss its GHG emissions targets. No wonder. Everyone will remember the Liberals' environmental legacy. The purchase of Trans Mountain, 34 billion of our money in one big pipe. And still, billions garroted just like that for the oil companies.
He's not
gobbling
doing
up
enough
public
for you,
money,
is he?
polluting and destroying our climate. The Minister of the Environment should be proud. Can the Liberals take responsibility for once and stop pretending to be
He wants
interested
Canada
in the climate
to
crisis?
go down to shoot faster than Gilbo's already sending us. These people are mad, madder than hatters.
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister, Minister for Finance. Mr. Speaker, our government
Gilbo's not allowed to
has
answer
done
questions
more
today.
in the fight against climate change than any federal government in the history of Canada. We've put a price on
Yeah,
pollution.
they've got a Greenpeace activist running their show.
We have a massive industrial program to the tune of $93 billion to stimulate our green transition. We are, and we should be proud of what we
No,
do, and we
Speaker
know
has not been asked
that
to
we
resign.
can and will do more.
The Honourable Member from Vancouver Kingsway.
Mr. Speaker, the Liberals have been letting the ultra-rich off the hook for years. But thanks to the NDP's capital gains changes, the wealthiest will
thanks
pay
to the
a
NDP,
little
yeah.
more. And the
Thanks to the
Conservative
NDP,
leader
Trudeau's
doesn't
still there.
like this. Maybe that's why he's getting wined and dined tonight by Bay Street billionaires at a cash for access fundraiser. Like the Liberals, the Conservatives would rather hand out billions to wealthy CEOs than fund the services people really need. Why are the Liberals maintaining
Well, then why are
the
you supporting them?
Conservatives' corporate giveaways?
Look, you don't look like you've missed any meals lately.
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I am really glad that the member opposite has raised an issue about which the Conservatives have been notably silent, and that is our increase in the inclusion rate on capital gains. We agree with the member opposite that it is just not fair for a nurse or carpenter to pay tax at a higher marginal rate than a multimillionaire. But I agree with the member opposite. I think the Conservatives support that kind of unfair tax policy.
And your capital gains tax increase is going to be another financial
legalizing
disaster.
hard drugs is misleading Canadians. Yesterday, she told Canadians that Liberals were waiting for further information from British Columbia in response to BC's request to end this legalization experiment. Yet, just yesterday, the BC minister responsible told us that they had responded to the government in just a few hours. This, when BC had 2,500 overdoses in just 1 year. Why are the Liberals misleading Canadians, and will they end their radical drug policy?
The Honourable Minister for Addictions and Mental Health.
Mr. Speaker, the
Oh, this
opioid
is
crisis
a
is
piece of
affecting
work, this one.
communities and families across this country, and it's a tragedy. That is why the BC government approached the federal government for a 3-year pilot program. BC communities are facing extremely serious challenges, and people are dying from deadly street drugs, and public consumption is a concern. BC is amending their proposal, and we are supporting them in this work, Mr. Speaker, because that's what we do. We partner together to save lives. What is their plan, Mr. Speaker?
Fat cats. Yeah, I think I would love that.
From
Brian?
Thompson Caribou.
Well, they
We
did
get a lot of
partner
fat
together. They
cats in
partnered
this house
together
here.
for a radical policy that has led to countless deaths. Imagine an elderly woman in hospital having to sit beside somebody, lay beside somebody who is smoking crystal meth.
The Honourable Member to start again. I'm hearing some
these
voices from the far end of this room, which
I mean, they never
cannot
leave
hear.
their upper crust
I'm
in
asking-
atmosphere, do they?
I'll ask the Honourable Member to start his question from the top. The Honourable Member from Kamloops, Thompson.
Thank you, Brian. Yes, I'd love to hear it.
The minister is correct. The Liberals have partnered with somebody. They partnered with the provincial NDP to create a crisis of unprecedented proportions that led to people dying due to their
The
radical
inmates are running
policy.
the asylum.
After 9 years, this Liberal NDP government is flooding the market with free drugs. This is happening to our brothers, our sisters, our fathers, our mothers, our children. They are all being fueled with addiction of the free drugs. Will the Prime Minister reverse course and end his radical experiment of legalization?
The Honourable Minister for Mental Health and Addictions.
Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we work with our provincial jurisdictions to ensure the health and safety of Canadians in the face of this toxic drug supply. We are treating this with urgency, Mr. Speaker, and all partners are working together to find a path forward as fast as possible to provide operational clarity for law enforcement, healthcare services, and all those who are involved in saving lives, Mr. Speaker. We want the same thing, public safety and access to public healthcare services for those who need it. They would cut everything. We are here to save lives. John.
You're here to save lives,
Before I
right?
pass the microphone again to the Minister, for the Honourable Member from Kelowna Lake Country, I'm going to ask all members, please, to hold your comments until you're recognized to have the floor. The Honourable Member from Kelowna Lake Country.
Mr. Speaker, the Liberal minister responsible for legal hard drugs in British Columbia isn't being straight with Canadians.
Tracy.
Yesterday, she said she's waiting for more data from BC to decide if she would reverse her decision to legalize drugs like cocaine, opioids, and fentanyl in parks, playgrounds, and hospitals. The BC NDP confirmed yesterday they answered the Liberal government's request for more data within hours. After 9 years of this Prime Minister, drug deaths tragically rose 380%, as if that wasn't enough data. Why won't the Liberals be honest with Canadians and just end their radical drug policies?
Great question. The Honourable
John,
Minister for Mental Health and Addictions.
Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we speak to our provincial counterparts and those who are the experts and with lived and living experience. The opposition, the member from Carleton, won't even meet with Mom Stop the Harm or other experts and those who are advocating for their families and their lives. We continue to work with our BC counterparts. They have provided amendments to their proposals, and we are working together to face the public consumption issues.
Oh, fuck. You can't even
The
remember
Member
your
from
lines.
Kelowna Lake Country.
Well, Mr.
What a
Speaker, I
carcass.
speak to residents in my community, and the minister isn't listening to British Columbians. She didn't listen to BC mayors who wanted to stop open drug use in their community a year ago. She's not listening to BC parents horrified to
watching
find
today.
crack wipes and needles near schools and playgrounds. A student project from a school in my community had students writing to me about issues important to them. Unbelievably, crime and open drug use was the #1 issue. This Prime Minister is not worth the cost. Why won't these Liberals be honest with Canadians and just end their radical drug policy?
The Honourable Minister for Mental Health and Addictions.
Mr. Speaker, Conservatives
can't take much more of
with
this one.
Canadians about their care or concern for those who are dying from the toxic drug supply. The opposition leader talks a big talk about investing in treatment, but Conservatives cut 2/3 of their drug treatment fund when they were in power, Mr. Speaker. They only focus on treatment and recovery. They don't focus on safe consumption sites. They don't focus on harm reduction as healthcare.
They're not safe.
Mr. Speaker, we need to partner with everyone. When will they listen?
And he calls it those toxic
The honourable
street
member
drugs.
from
Like the drugs
Fraser Canyon.
are somehow safer when the government gives them out.
Responsible for legal hard
What
drugs
BS.
is misleading Canadians. Drug overdoses
An
are now the
evil
leading
woman.
cause of death among youth aged 10 to 18 in British Columbia.
Shameful.
Just yesterday, she said she was waiting on more information from the BC NDP government, which the province said they delivered within hours. How much more information does she need to end their radical and
doesn't need any
extremist
more.
policy, which is putting the children of British Columbia at risk?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and
They
Minister
don't
of
want to
Finance.
change the policy.
Mr. Speaker,
Mr.
unlike
Speaker.
the Conservatives, I have been in touch with the province of BC. BC requested the pilot project, and I was in touch this week with the Premier of BC. He and his government have
Who's another
serious
moron.
concerns about the pilot project. We share those concerns, and we are working together with BC to address them. But I do want to say,
Take you 5
making
minutes to
political
address
hay
this.
out of the pain of suffering Canadian families is simply irresponsible.
The Honourable Member
Just
from
shocking, isn't it?
Mashpee Fraser Canyon.
Mr. Speaker, this government is supposed to be in the business of protecting children, not killing them with exposure and access to hard drugs. The RCMP has confirmed that legal hard drugs are being sold on the black market. In Abbotsford, the Soccer Association has to regularly sweep the needles for pitch. The Legion and many businesses in Mission have to deal with crack smoke every day. When will this government do the right thing and cancel their ideologically extreme experiment to legalize hard drugs and start protecting BC's children?
Yes, I think Phelan did
The
indeed
Honourable Deputy
purchase
Prime Minister
that
and
item.
Minister of Finance.
You could dump a quarter off the liker around her waist.
As a
Yes.
mother of 3, including teenagers, I care so much about Canada and Canadians. And I
George,
agree,
bad day.
opioid addiction is a tragedy. It is a public health tragedy, and it is a public safety tragedy. But let me tell you what is putting the public safety of all Canadians at risk.
Listen,
Consorting
everybody.
with white supremacists and misogynists. That is a public safety risk. The Conservatives have an opportunity today to disavow that. They should do it.
Oh, excuse our human being.
The Honourable Member for Juliette. Yesterday, the National Assembly adopted a historic unanimous motion. It, and I quote, denounces the refusal of the New Democratic, the Conservative and the Liberal parties of Canada to recognise the principle of respect for Quebec's areas of jurisdiction and to grant Quebec the right to opt out with full compensation. This is the very first time that the National Assembly of Quebec has unanimously blamed each and every Federalist party by name because they're all working against Quebec. When the government says it is working hand in hand with Quebec, are they working hand in hand rather with these parties against Quebec? The Honourable
Isn't that
Minister for
obscene?
Transport.
You get fined for smoking a
Speaker.
cigarette in the car with a child, but you can smoke crack on a playground beside
Going
a
against the
5-year-old.
Quebecois isn't going
This
against
country
Quebec
is
because we are working with
mad.
Quebec on housing,
Crazy.
on seniors, on young people, on childcare, so that kids can go to work
obvious to everybody,
with their
isn't it?
stomachs full.
Except
but
for
the
these
Quebecois is
people
always against all of this.
Talking right now.
They do the opposite of what we promise for Quebecers. We're trying to fight for seniors. We're trying to fight against climate change, and they always vote against. So shame on them, Mr. Speaker.
Oh, how did we get climate change?
Before the member for Joliette has the floor, I would like to encourage members in this House to not interrupt the person who has the floor. And I hope that this will be applicable as well for when the Honourable Member for Joliette takes the floor, which is now. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's historic, this unanimous motion. The Canada's Liberals have been denounced by their Liberal allies in Quebec. The NDP was denounced by Quebec Solidaire. The Conservatives, well, they weren't denounced by their ally, Éric Duhem, well, because he has no MPs, and Quebecers don't vote Conservative. But they too were condemned by the unanimous National Assembly of other stripes. All the elected representatives in Quebec City can see that all the Federalist elected representatives in Ottawa are working to undermine Quebec's ability to make their own social choices, or societal choices rather. Does the government realise the precedent it has set? The Honourable Minister for Transport. Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives do have an ally. It's the Bloc Québécois. It's the Bloc Québécois, Mr. Speaker. They always seem to vote together.
Your ally.
There's a bit of malaise in that corner. When one makes a promise and one does the opposite, then promises are shattered. Promises for those who trusted them and voted for them. They say they want to fight for seniors. They say they want to fight for the environment, but they always vote against. Why? Because they just simply follow the Conservative playbook. The Honourable Member for Joliette. The federal government in this budget wants to tell Quebecers how to run Quebec, whether it's in healthcare, housing, or any other area. Liberal Conservative NDPs, by refusing to amend the budget, the three parties have eminently shown that they want to become the puppet masters of Quebec. However, yesterday's unanimous response from the National Assembly was clear. We, Quebecers, still want to be masters in our own homes. Does the Minister for Finance see that Quebecers do not accept that elected representatives of the neighbouring nation should decide Quebecers' priorities instead of Quebecers?
It's an interesting story, Brian.
The Honourable Minister for Public Services and Procurement.
Rather than get you off drugs, they wanted you to have a safe supply.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
So pathetic.
And in my riding, a number of our priorities is to have access to quality and affordable dental care. And big news, since yesterday, thousands of people in my riding and throughout Quebec now have access to dental care. Affordable and quality dental care. This is huge news for all Canadians, and it's great news for all Quebecers as well.
The Honourable Member from Thornhill.
The Liberal government's dangerous drug policy in BC allows people to smoke crack on a public bus, to shoot up next to a park with people with children playing there, to blow smoke from meth in the face of a nurse in a hospital. Now we learn what the Liberals want to do to Toronto, what they've done to BC. The Leader of the Opposition sent the Prime Minister a letter asking them to reject Toronto's request. Are the nurses in Toronto getting people who smoke meth in hospital rooms, or will they finally reject the request?
The Honourable Minister for Mental Health and Addictions.
Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we are completely committed to working with communities across this country in facing the opioid crisis and the tragedies that are happening to so many families. Every request is reviewed on a case-by-case basis. The member should know this. Toronto Public Health has not submitted a proposal that adequately addresses the dual objectives of public health and public safety, which have guided us throughout addressing the opioid crisis. Every level of government, including the province, must be engaged in this process, and we continue to work together.
The Liberals want to destroy Canada. Yes.
Speaker, their plan is killing 22 Canadians every day, and opioid deaths have doubled in this country in just 2 years. I can't believe that the minister from Toronto wants to expand this lawlessness into her own city. Otherwise, she would just say no. I'll give her an opportunity to just say that. One more opportunity to stop this extremist experiment on the streets of Toronto. Yes or no? Will you reject it?
Well, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to read all these comments from you folks.
Mr. Speaker,
well, look at her try to look seductive now.
I'm a Toronto MP. I'm a Toronto mother. I know, as everyone in this House should, that the opioid crisis is a tragedy, and there are no families in Canada that are untouched by it. The BC pilot project was requested by BC. BC has serious concerns. We share those concerns. We are addressing it. There is no other pilot project anywhere in Canada, and the BC experience should and will be instructive.
It's totally inadequate.
The honourable member from Durham.
Mr. Speaker, it's been 24 hours since the Leader of the Opposition sent the Prime Minister a letter asking him to reject Toronto City Hall's request to legalize hard drugs. And we're getting no serious answers from this NDP Liberal government.
No kidding.
After seeing death and disorder in BC, why can't the Prime Minister take the no-brainer and say no? At what time today can we expect an answer to Toronto City Hall?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I think the members opposite were not listening to
That
my
woman is a
previous
caricature
answer.
of a
The
bad
only
politician.
pilot project in Canada is in BC. BC has serious concerns. We share them, and we're acting urgently together to resolve them. There are no other pilot projects anywhere in Canada. I think all Canadians are aware of the BC experience and need to take it into account. But you know what, Mr. Speaker? We've invested $200 billion in the healthcare system. They voted against it.
The Joe Token experience.
The honourable member from Port Moody, Coquitlam.
People in Port Moody, Coquitlam are struggling to keep up with the skyrocketing rents and grocery prices. Meanwhile, the Conservative leader is schmoozing with Canada's wealthiest at a $3,500
And meanwhile, you're
a year
schmoozing with
wine
Justin
club.
Trudeau.
This is the guy who said he
Juanita.
cut dental care and pharmacare in favor of keeping billion-dollar corporate handouts. And the Liberals are no better. They're letting big grocery CEOs rack up obscene profits while Canadians go hungry. When will the Liberals stop this corporate greed?
The
You're
Honourable Minister
so
for
concerned in
Housing,
that quarter,
Infrastructure and
aren't you?
Communities.
Mr. Speaker, in the recent federal budget, we put forward a plan to establish fairness for every generation that's going to ask the wealthiest to pay a little bit more so we can fund the things that really matter to the people who've been struggling the last couple of years. We've got plans that are going to reduce the cost of living by reducing the cost of housing, by solving the housing crisis. We've got a plan to launch a national school food program to make sure that hungry kids can put food on the table. And as I give this answer, the Conservatives jeer because they do not support the measures that are going to
Because they know
help
you're a joke and a
vulnerable people in
clown.
this
You
country.
failed at everything
We
you
will stand
tried.
up for the middle class. We will stand up to vote for the vulnerable. It's a shame the Conservatives won't join us.
It's a shame.
The honourable member from Nanaimo, Ladysmith.
Mr. Speaker, while rich CEOs make record profits, families in Nanaimo Ladysmith can barely put food on the table. And what's the Conservative leader doing about it? Well, he's hosting
Now,
a
there's
fundraiser with
the
Canada's
haven for
richest
hard
elites
drugs,
that
Nanaimo.
cost thousands just to step
I
through
used
the
to live
door.
just up the
It's
island
no
from there.
wonder when he was in power, the biggest corporations got $60 billion in handouts while gutting services to British Columbians. And the Liberals, they maintain these handouts. Will the government end these corporate giveaways?
The Honourable Minister of Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, I would agree with my colleague that it's disturbing to see the Leader of the Opposition siding with big corporate at a time where, Mr. Speaker, all Canadians should be united to put pressure on the grocery in this country, Mr. Speaker. If they are really honest about caring for Canadians on the other side, Mr. Speaker, let them speak up. Let them tell to Loblaws and Walmart to adopt the grocery code of conduct in this country, Mr. Speaker. If we speak with one voice, we're going to improve the
When's
lives
the
of
last time
Canadians.
you ever
Are they
went to
going to do it?
Loblaw? No, they're going to get rid of you.
The Honourable Member from Halifax.
Mr. Speaker, Halifax is home to thousands of researchers with limitless potential, and it's essential to provide the support necessary to fully unleash that potential. Halifax researchers are making advancements in ocean science, brain repair, lithium-ion battery technology, pediatrics, and so much more. Their work contributes to the economic and social prosperity of Canada and improves the lives of all Canadians. Could the Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry please tell us how Budget 2024 will support research and researchers in Halifax and across Canada? Hear, hear.
The Honourable
Fergus
Minister for
is
Innovation.
still there
Mr.
because he
Speaker,
has
what
the
a great
support of the
question
Prime
from a great
Minister.
member, Mr. Speaker. This is a colleague which has been
Mr. Speaker. Canada researchers and students are our greatest resource in this country. Researchers at Dalhousie, Mr. Speaker, are pushing the boundaries of brain health, big data, and ocean research. In Budget 2024, we invested $3.4 billion in our world-leading talent, Mr. Speaker. Students will see an increase in their stipends to support their research and attract the best and brightest. Mr. Speaker, the science of today is the economy of tomorrow. Let's invest in our futures together.
Now, where did you read that one?
Charlebourg, Haute-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, interest on the debt is skyrocketing and will continue to do so while spending remains out of control. And the Bloc continues to support these liberal centralizing policies that are driving up the cost of living. For example, on December 13th, the Bloc voted for over $20 billion in budgetary items. When will the Prime Minister, supported by the Bloc, stop wasting money so that Quebecers can start enjoying a decent life again? The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, I'm very pleased to finally have a question on the economy, because this gives me the opportunity to share some good news from the Governor of the Bank of Canada. He said today that we have gone through a long road in the fight against inflation, and recent progress is encouraging. The message to Canadians is the following: we are getting close to the goal. This is good news thanks to the work of Canadians. Thank you for the opportunity. The Honourable Member for Charlebourg, Haute-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, I'll remind the Minister of Finance that 48% of Liberal supporters finds that their government is not managing public finances well. That was in a recent Léger poll. Even worse, there's the Bloc, which pretends to be critical and to defend Quebec's interests. They voted for $500 billion in additional budget items. It's really, really, really expensive to vote for the Bloc, the party that supports this financial disaster. When will the Prime Minister, supported by the Bloc, stop their out-of-control spending and give Quebecers some respite? The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our colleague is talking about poor management. Mr. Speaker, have you already heard that during the whole term of the Conservative leader, when he was Minister of Housing, he built six affordable housing units throughout the country?
Very good point, Karina Mitchell.
In the writing of my colleague,
Yeah, it's
over the
called
past few months,
capitalism. Yeah, it's pretty
I have an
basic
updated
stuff.
number. There are 222
They're supposed to.
affordable housing
They're
units
supposed
that
to
have been built
survive
in
on
just his writing.
1% profit margin.
6 during the whole term of the Conservative leader as housing minister. The Honourable Member for Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier. Mr. Speaker, I don't know if I'm speaking to the professor of the Université de Laval or the procurement minister. Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of this Prime Minister, the cost of living has never been higher. People are being squeezed. Mortgages, housing, food, everything is more expensive. This Liberal government isn't worth the cost, and neither is the Bloc Québécois. Just a reminder, it was the Bloc that voted for $500 billion in budgetary items. We're talking about $500 billion in centralizing and inflationary spending that has been supported by the Bloc Québécois. When will this Prime Minister stop its waste so that Quebecers can skip the food banks and regain their dignity? The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, once again, a good opportunity to talk about the economy. First, we have a responsible policy fiscally. We have a AAA credit rating, the highest possible. And I'll refer to the Bank of Canada's governor, who's talked about the good progress on inflation. But the Conservatives, their only policy is austerity and cut. They want to cut daycares, cut school food programs, and cut Radio-Canada CBC, which is so important for
you
Quebecers.
bet. Cut Radio-Canada CBC to the bone. No, sell it.
Mr. Speaker,
Don't even
after
talk
9
about
years
cutting it.
of
Sell
budgetary
it.
chaos, this government, supported by the Bloc,
Get rid of it.
continues with its inflationary spending. They are throwing money out the window.
Oh, the Bloc will
The
hate
Bloc
that
talks
when
about the
Radio
importance of
Canada
health
goes
transfers, but they voted for
into the
$500
gutter.
billion in centralizing spending, which has more interest costs than
But
the
of
money
course,
that
if
goes to
it's so
health
damn good,
transfers. The more this government
it should be able to
spends, the
survive
more
on
the
its
Bloc
own,
supports
shouldn't
it. When will the Prime Minister stop wasting taxpayer money? The Honourable Minister of
when hell
Innovation.
freezes over.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians who are listening today understand that they have a choice. On one side of the House, Mr. Speaker, they hear the voice of a party that has no ambition, no vision, no plan for the future. On this side of the House, what people understand is that they have a Liberal government, a government that has a vision for the future, a government that has a plan for the coming generations, a government that has ambition
have a
for our
plan for
country, Mr.
tomorrow.
Speaker. What I tell Canadians is listen to what you're hearing. You'll see that on this side of the House, we will fight for you every day.
Oh, we're listening. Everybody's listening, and you've got nothing to say
Honourable
except
Member for
vacuous
Jonquière.
words.
We've learned that Canada's greenhouse gas emissions rose between 2021 and 2022. They're going up
Why is the
when they should be
Separatist
going
Party
down.
voting on a
But
Canadian
what's most
budget? It's
catastrophic
exactly
is that they're going to
what
keep
I say every day,
skyrocketing
Darcy.
because Ottawa
They
opened
have
Trans
no
Mountain
business being in this
yesterday.
House of
The
Commons. They
Minister
have
of the
no. They
Environment
should have no
has just
right to
turned
be
on
in the
the
House
dirty
of
oil
Commons.
tap.
They're not a
Another
federalist party. They're
600,000
a bunch
barrels
of treasonous
every day
separatists.
are piped
They
out
should
of the
not be
oil
here. They
sands
should
for
not be
export.
collecting a
Can the Minister
paycheck
of the
from
Environment
you,
explain to
and they
us
should
how
not be
his
getting
new dirty
any
oil pipeline
kind
will help us lower emissions?
of
The Honourable
pension
Minister
plan
of the
from
Environment
us
and
either.
Climate Change. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague for his question
Oh,
and remind him that
Dimeball
greenhouse
got a
gas
chance to stand up
emissions
today.
are 44 million tons lower in 2024 than they were before the pandemic. That's the equivalent of 13 million vehicles taken off our roads. Greenhouse
Yeah, and
gas
that's what you'd like to
emissions
do, wouldn't
have
it? Take
never
the
been as
vehicles
low
off the
in
road so
Canada
we have to
in
walk
25
everywhere
years.
or ride our bikes 40 miles.
So that's when Conor McGregor was
This
born.
man is such an incredibly
Things are going
incompetent
very well, but I
nincompoop.
agree with my
Such an
colleague. There's much work to be done
incredibly
still.
stupid
The Honourable Member
individual.
for Jonquière. Greenpeace told Radio Canada, CBC, that the missing link in the federal climate plan is a cap on emissions from the oil
No, the
sector.
missing link
The
is
minister must
called
be
Stephen
relieved
Guilbeault,
that
and he's in the federal
there's no
cabinet.
ceiling on emissions because he would have banged his head on it with the Trans Mountain emissions. It's a reminder that Canada is the fourth largest petromonarchy in the world. With Trans Mountain, it consolidates its fourth place between Russia and
These
Iraq
people are
at the
absolutely
top
out
of
of
the
their
worst
fucking thick
polluters.
skull.
We
Excuse
know
my
that the
language
minister
there.
never dreamed of being a petromonarch. So will he ever put a limit on his country's greed for black gold?
I hope you
Honourable
have
Minister
to walk
of
for
the
the rest of your
Environment
life
and Climate
everywhere you
Change.
go.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Your electric vehicle
My
battery
colleague mentioned Greenpeace.
doesn't work.
Greenpeace in that same interview recognized that we are making progress in Canada and that this year's record is very encouraging, but that more needs to be done. I'd like to remind my colleague that there's one country in the G20 that has put an end to fossil fuel subsidies, and that is Canada.
There were
We've
no
committed to
fossil
going
fuel
even further by
subsidies.
eliminating
This
public
man is so
funding,
stupid.
which no other country in the world has committed to doing. And the cap on greenhouse gas emissions is coming. We're the only major oil producer in the world to have proposed putting a cap on those emissions, Mr. Speaker.
The longer this lunatic stays in power,
The Honourable
the
Member for
greater
Lévis
the chance this
Vignette.
country will
Mr.
go
Speaker,
down the chute
after
of
9 years,
oblivion.
the Bloc and the Prime Minister are not worth the cost. The Bloc has always voted with the Liberals on government budgets. We're talking about $500 billion in centralizing and inflationary spending, and that hurts. This spending increases the cost of living and keeps interest rates high. With the Bloc, Quebecers are going hungry. They're having trouble housing themselves, and they are hurting. Mr. Speaker, when will this Prime Minister, supported by the Bloc, stop wasting money so that Quebecers can once again afford decent housing and food? The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, I am really pleased to have another
Lee
opportunity
Donaldson, you're
to
welcome. Thank you
refer
for saying
to the
that.
Governor of the Bank of Canada,
It's one of
who
those.
shared
It's not the
very
best
good
day in
news
question
today
period, but
with Canadians.
can't do much about that.
He said, the message to Canadians is the following. We are getting closer to the goal. He's also said that it's our government's fiscal responsibility that has allowed him to stabilize inflation, and that will allow us to reduce the overnight rate.
From Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Island, and Rideau Lakes.
After 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, the employment minister has been caught in shady lobbying, and we can see that this prime minister and his government certainly aren't worth the cost.
Oh, I'm glad somebody brought this up.
The minister was caught cashing checks from a lobbying firm that was lobbying his own government, his own ministry.
That's cue ball.
How much taxpayer cash did this minister and his company shove in their pockets? How much? How much? How much?
I would love to see this rascal go down. He won't stand up and answer that question. The fraud and the shyster. This is the clown who keeps calling those trans kids all night long. What a disgrace.
Speaker, the minister has always followed the very strict ethics rules that apply to him as an elected official. Canada has one of the strictest ethics regimes in the world for elected officials, and that is exactly what Canadians.
Oh, this clown.
The minister has always conducted himself in an ethical manner that follows the spirit and letter of those rules.
That's right. Good answer.
The honourable member from Leeds Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
Well, after 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, we know that the fish rots from the head down. And this prime minister twice found guilty of breaking ethics laws, along with multiple members of his front bench and his back bench. We know that
should have been the first question of the day.
He was getting money from his
This makes
company
me
that
mad.
was lobbying his own government, even his own ministry, but he got caught. Global News reported it, and now we're asking him about it. So instead of having the government House leader protect him from his own accountability,
He won't even stand up and face the music.
Stand up today and tell us how much money he took.
I love it. This should have been the first question of the day, because this guy is a total ass.
The honourable government House leader.
Mr. Speaker, I just gave that answer. Thank you.
You're not going to stand up, are you?
The honourable leader.
Cue ball,
the
stand
honourable
up.
Member from Leeds Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes. Oh, I'm sorry. We only.
Now, why weren't they harassing this SOB all during question period? The strategy from the Conservative Party is lacking so
Mr.
much
Speaker,
at times.
as we approach Red
What
Dress
can I
Day,
say?
which raises awareness of the alarming rates of violence.
Following calls for the introduction of a red dress alert system. This system would be crucial in promptly informing the public whenever an Indigenous woman, girl, or two-spirited person goes missing.
What
Can
the
the
hell
Minister
is that
on
about?
Indigenous Relations share with us what measures are being taken to address this critical issue?
You
Thank
want
so
a
much.
special law for these two-spirited people, whatever the hell that is.
Mr. Speaker, I want to recognize the advocates, families,
What's
and
he got? A
survivors
toaster on
working
his
tirelessly to press
lapel?
our government for urgent action. That includes a member from Winnipeg Centre
These
and the
people are
member
just out
from
of their
Oakville,
stupid
North
little heads.
Burlington.
They haven't got two wits to rub together. They don't have a thought in the world,
Leslie Varley,
and they
Angela
think they're a
McDougall,
government.
Gladys Raddick, Lorna Brown, and Denise Halfyard, who are advancing the implementation of a red dress alert system. Their efforts are crucial in bringing Indigenous women, girls, and two-spirit people home safely. And I thank
They
the
actually
member
repeat this
from
shit
Dorval,
like
Sheila
it
South
means
for her
something.
advocacy leveraging the $1.3
And
million
it's just
in
blather.
budget 2024. Our government will put an end.
Yeah, I couldn't get to the rest of my talking point.
The sole Liberal minister from Alberta is at the center of two corruption scandals. It has been reported that the minister is tied to a lobbyist who received a staggering $110 million in federal contracts, and the minister is the director of the company that received a further $8 million of government contracts and is engulfed in allegations of fraud and wire fraud. So how much money did this minister and his companies receive from these shady contracts?
He won't get up again. I don't even know if the bastard's in the house.
The honourable government House leader.
Come on, Randy. Where are you?
Speaker, as I said earlier in response to our other honourable friend, the minister has always followed the strict ethics rules that apply to him as an elected official. Canada has one of the strictest ethics regimes in the world for elected officials, and that is exactly what Canadians expect. The minister has always conducted himself in an ethical manner that follows the spirit and letter of those rules.
That's right.
The honourable member from St. Albert, Edmonton.
Mr. Speaker, the minister has been on the take with taxpayers' money. The minister retains a 50% stake in a company that is engulfed in allegations of fraud, and the minister continues to receive payments from the lobbying firm that received $110 million in federal contracts. So will the minister finally have the guts to stand in his place
Michael
and tell
Cooper on
Canadians
his
how
feet
much he
first
pocketed
today?
on taxpayers?
This is a decent question. Because why these liberals will protect cue ball Randy Boissonneau for anything. I am so happy to see somebody has got some information on this guy. Because you just know he is up to no good. This guy just reeks of it.
All members are entitled to be treated by other members with a presumption of being honorable.
No, they're not, because you're not honorable. You're a bunch of thieves.
Him to carefully consider the words that he just employed while doing
No.
a speech into a television.
You're not honorable.
One that he would never do.
You're an actor reading a script. That's all you are. You're not honorable.
Very, very careful.
You have no right to be in there. And Steve McKinnon, you're just as bad as Randy.
From Brantford, Brent. After 9 years of this NDP,
but they waited until the very
another Liberal
to
minister
raise
is
this
embroiled in
question.
the
How
ethics
stupid
scandal.
the Conservative Party
This
can be.
employment minister continued to serve
Incredibly
as a
stupid. They
director
just
of a
don't
company
think about what
that
is
secured
actually
over
important.
$8 million in government contracts, and his former lobbying firm got direct access to the Prime Minister's office and the Finance Minister's office. Everyone who has their hands on the purse strings. This Prime Minister is not.
I mean, the drug issue is important, but you can say the same question 15, 20 times over and over and get the same response 15 times over and over. Let's get Boston.
Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I've answered that question, and I would once again invite members from all sides of this House to be very, very careful with the words that they utter.
Don't issue bail threats. You excuse for a government House leader.
Coast,
That's the first excitement we've had in this.
Proposes funding for Canada's first ever action plan on combating hate, which will support community outreach, law enforcement reform, tackle the rise in hate crimes, enhance community security, counter radicalization, and increase support for victims. This plan was drafted way before Canadians realized that the leader of the official opposition was cozying up with white nationalists. Can the minister please tell this House what impacts far-right extremism has on our community?
Oh, you're kidding. What the hell is that supposed to mean?
The Honourable Minister for Diversity.
Well, I can tell you about far-left extremism. It's in the House of Commons right now.
Everyone in this House. Anything otherwise is shameful and frankly appalling. When the leader of the opposition decided to cozy up to far-right extremist supporters, it is unbecoming of any elected official, much
Shut
less the
your
leader
bloody
of the major
mouth.
political
You don't even know what you're talking about. You're so incredibly vacuous. There's not a thought in your stupid-looking head.
His question was recommended by the chair. The chair was quite happy to make sure that the honourable member had a free
No,
time
he
to be able
doesn't
to
have a
ask
point
his
to
question.
make.
I'd ask the honourable member, please, to hold back his
It's once
comments
again
while the
there.
minister
It's
is
this
answering.
horrible diagonal
Minister for
force that's
Diversity
going to capture the government any day
when
now.
the leader of the opposition decided to cozy up to far-right extremist supporters, it is unbecoming of any elected official, much less the leader of a major Canadian political party. Canadians expect their leaders to stand up for
What about your
Canadian
leader who
values.
did blackface
That's
for
why,
30
Mr.
years,
Speaker,
eh?
we're investing $270 million in the budget for Canada's first ever action plan on combating
You
hate.
people are a
Mr.
bunch
Speaker,
of
that's leadership.
imposters. You're a bunch of losers, and you're going to lose big time if we're allowed to have an election next year. You people are jokes. Well, can he work his mic today?
The honourable member from Skeena-Bulkley Valley.
He can't work his little mic
Yesterday,
button today.
10,000 Canadian rail workers voted to strike because, in part, Canada's two largest railway companies want to undermine key safety measures in their collective agreements. The safety of rail workers, the safety of rail communities, and the safety of our environment are all at stake. Will the minister ensure the parties remain at the bargaining table until a fair, safe, and equitable agreement is reached?
Here, here.
The Honourable Minister for Labour.
Question. What is happening right now is a cooling off period, is a normal part of the collective bargaining process. Our facilitators and conciliators remain closely with both parties at the table.
Closely
we
with both
remain
parties.
committed on this side, as I know the honourable member is, to making
Don't
sure
worry.
that the table remains.
Happy
the
hour
best
is coming.
deals
Don't
are
worry,
made
James.
at the table. Thank you very much for the question.
The Honourable Member from Saanich Gulf Islands.
Mr. Speaker, even for the Liberals, this is really something. It's a hat trick. 3 times, 3 different platform promises broken in one omnibus budget bill. First up, they broke the commitment to have UNDRIP honored and to consult with Indigenous people. Second, they used an omnibus budget bill to change environmental legislation. Third, once again, they failed to fix the Environmental Assessment Act. Let's make it simple. Environmental assessment under Mulroney's law worked. Harper repealed it. It still doesn't work. This draft in this Ways and Means bill will go
What
down to the
sense?
feet
I
of
don't
the
have any
Supreme Court.
censorship. What are
Once
you talking
again,
about?
fix it.
Turn your
once
censorship
and for
off,
all, and
Crayden.
use the environmental
I don't know what you're
expert
talking about.
panel
What
to
the hell you're
guide your
talking
action.
about?
The Honourable Minister for the Environment and Climate Change.
Mr. Speaker, and I thank my honourable colleague for her question. As per the Supreme Court asked us to do, we have brought changes to the Impact Assessment Act of Canada to ensure that the federal government will do what the federal government is supposed to be doing while provinces do their part in impact assessment. And we're confident that this will help us to move
I'm
forward.
confident
And I
that
will
you're
remind my
driving
honourable
this
colleague
country
that
into
at
the
the time that
dust.
this bill was adopted, C-69, we did
And your
not have
and your
fuel
plastics
standards.
crap
We did not have zero-emission vehicle
is
standards.
all
We
fraud
did not have regulations on methanes. We
because
weren't
you're
working on a cap
dumping
on oil and gas emissions
toxic
or clean
waste
electricity standard, Mr.
and
Speaker.
plastics
Thank you.
in third world countries. You little hypocrite.
And such,
You insignificant
such
worm
comes to
of a
the
man.
end of question period. It's now time
Well,
for the
that was
regular
fun.
Thursday question.
What is the Thursday question? Okay. Well, wasn't that fun, folks? Yes. Like I said, they waited till the very end to go after Randy Boissonneau, this hack of a minister from Edmonton, who's always pretending he's got the interests of Alberta at heart. And they waited until the end. They should have gone after this guy because you knew he wasn't going to stand up. You know he's bloody well not going to even address the issue because he's going to look pretty guilty, isn't he? So they get the House leader to stand up and do it for him. I tell you, our system really, really disgusts me at times. You know, I had a great conversation this morning with Kyle Kemper, the half-brother of this idiot prime minister. And Kyle was saying, and he agreed with me, why don't we talk about referenda, recall, and initiative? We used to talk about these things during the days of the old Reform Party. We haven't talked about these things in decades. The Conservative Party of Canada never talks about them, and you won't hear them from the Liberals or the NDP. And who cares about the Bloc? They're irrelevant. They shouldn't even be sitting in the House. They should have no say on federal legislation, federal budgets at all, because they are completely insular and they're a bunch of treasonous bastards. And I call them that. I've been calling them that my entire adult life, ever since they came on the scene. And when I worked on the Hill, I had no truck or trade with those people because I said, you shouldn't be here. You shouldn't even be getting a salary. You should be not getting a pension either because you're not here for federalism. You're not here for Canada. You're here to break this country up. And you have no. Anyway, that is enough of that for today. But listen to my interview with Kyle Kemper. I'm going to put it up this afternoon. It's good. He's got some great things to say, and he talks about direct democracy, which is what we don't have in this country. We don't even have democracy anymore. In this QP, this question period we watch every day, I know it's agonizing at times, but it illustrates how bad our country is. It demonstrates how poor our democracy is. It shows just how lacking we are in individual freedom, basic liberty, and a system that actually addresses issues and problems. It's blather out, blather back, blather in, blather out. And that is what's frustrating. But we have to have some mechanism to go after these corrupt, liberal, MPs and cabinet ministers. Thanks for watching today. I had to laugh at that one about the Greenpeace missing link. Yeah, that's Stephen Guilbeault. He's the ass trying to be a minister right now, but all he is a Greenpeace felon. We'll be back again tomorrow.